Is that it? Are we on?
We're in.
We're on.
Ready?
Right, okay.
So today we have Sarah on. I met Sarah, how many years ago was it? It was 2019?
19.
At the UK Up Show. So it was my first ever show. And we met and kind of stayed friends ever since. Sarah has been competing for like 7-8 years now. You've absolutely smashed it. You've got quite a few good wins under your belt. You've even travelled with competing. You're now judging for UK Up and
MBS.
Yeah. Is there anything else?
So yeah, I mean, there's lots of different things I'm sort of getting into.
Pies.
Yeah. But my main focus this year is to be at shows and then the judging as well, and obviously compete myself.
Yeah, so you're obviously with like your extensive competing career, you have obviously had so many highs and lows, so we kind of wanted to get you on so you could talk about your journey, kind of share your experiences, how you've got to where you are now, how you're planning to keep moving things forward. So if we start from the beginning, like how did it all start? What made you decide to start, and what's your been, you know, from then until now, what's kind of made you start and then get to where you are now?
So when I first got into sport, it was through triathlon, and now I look back, I think I don't even know how I did that training. Like it was insane, going up to like half Ironman distance, and that ended up, because it's impact based with the running, and the cycling and swimming was okay, but I started to get a lot of pain in my back, mainly from the running. So I then went to watch a bodybuilding show, and I was like, this is so cool, like the tan, all the bikinis and stuff. I was like, wow. And then I was like, God, there's no way I could ever do that, because you know what it's like when you're looking up at something like this, it's like, how the hell do people get in this shape?
Definitely.
And like I had no idea how you would even get to that point. And then one of my friends was like, well, you could do that. And I was like, no way. Definitely not. And then I was like, oh, maybe I could. So I got a coach,
because that's how a lot of people start out, isn't it? That's exactly how Georgia started as well. Like when I first said it to her, she's like, "There's no way I could do that. I love food too much."
Yeah,
and it's very funny because we literally just had a conversation with your sister today.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? You put like people that compete on this pedestal, and you're like, they're just so amazing. Like that could never be me. So you already have, until you get in that world, you already have that feeling of self-doubt. Like you have that thing of like, well, how would I even start? Like because you're not in that world, you don't know coaches, you don't know how to do it, and you just immediately shut off, because that's like your defense, to be like, well, I could never do it. So, and you feel like that's your reassurance to yourself. And when you have that one person that says you can do it, obviously explaining there's more than just the stage, there's everything that goes with it. But when you've got that right person behind you, it just proves to yourself that you can do, if you want to do it, you absolutely can. It's just having, you know, enough knowledge behind you to understand the highs and lows from it. So yeah, carry on.
Yeah, so that was like, for me, I've never really been like girly and stuff, and I think we share that, Georgia, with like, you know, it's not like a natural thing for me. So even the thought of that was like, oh God, how are people standing there with a bikini on, like literally exposing everything? And obviously it being a physique sport, you are exposing yourself to the absolute max. Like I don't think there's any other situation where you could be exposing yourself more than being judged on a bodybuilding stage. It's not just your body, it's your hair, your makeup and everything else for females. So there's so much that goes into it, like you say. And so once I found a coach, I went into my first prep, and it wasn't until I got to stage lean that I realized I was incredibly skinny with hardly any muscle mass. So I then went into an off season, did it again, same scenario. And then I did it again. This time around, I got my boobs done. So that helped to, I feel like when you get really lean and you don't have that, it again sort of strips that female side of you as well. So that made a massive difference with my confidence in competing. And then I did another off season. When we met was my successful season in 2019. But until then, I hadn't really placed. Like the best I got was top 6. A lot of the time I felt like judges didn't even look at me because I wasn't really competitive. At the time, it was very, very hard to, I guess, understand that, because you think, well, I've been through a prep, like I've given my whole life to this, and they're not even looking at me. And that's like the dark side to bodybuilding, which for me, doing my own podcast and things, that's what I try and do, is help people understand that, you know, it is a subjective sport, and being judged, it's not, you know, the judges look at your physiques and that's what they see. They don't know your journey, they don't know anything else. So it's definitely given substance to my own journey and depth to what I do, and helping other people as well. But at the time, it's very, very hard.
Very mentally strong, haven't you? And it goes to prove like how mentally strong that you are. If you did, you know, how many shows was that? 2-3 shows you said?
Yeah, so I did the first two, like I had no chance, and then the third one I placed top 6, and then the fourth, and this is like a whole season, like a whole prep, so just competing once, and then another season where I came, I came 4th, and then went into my 2019 season. So it's like time and time again, you're like battered, and it's really tough. Like when I went into 2019, I was like, if I can't get some sort of placing, like top 3, is this something I should continue to do? Because obviously there's health implications to competing, you know, keep going in and out of dieting phases and what have you. And I had to have a sort of serious talk with myself and try and realize whether or not this was a sport for me. And then I had the really successful season with UKUP and some other shows. So that then led into where I am today. But that resilience, like, you can't put a price on that journey. And you know,
so many people that would do one show, you know, if they didn't place the way they thought they would, that would be it. They'd never compete again. So
I think there's a big difference as well from being realistic to what you can do. So don't kill yourself for like assuming you're going to be pro and then be really disappointed that you're not, but also know that, you know, set yourself up so something that's realistic, but also, you know, you're not going to be able to keep a T. Like every federation, which we'll touch on a bit, wants something slightly different. So, you know, you might get knocked back somewhere, but another federation might really like you. So it's about finding where you fit, but also if you get knocked back, why did you get knocked back? Like there's a reason, and that's going to be your like fork in the road moment of being like, because it was a bit like me with coming off FitX. I didn't get a look in at all, and it's just like, right, I can either go, clearly my anxiety's too much, I can't do this, whatever, or I can be like, right, I don't want to feel like this again. What went wrong? What went right? How am I going to come back? And then obviously 5 weeks later, I went on to NFM, you know, 1 pro show, 1 second overall, like, and that's the thing. And I was battered by that point. It's a horrible feeling, and you don't, you know, if you do just go, I can't do this, it's too much, and you know, that's no shame in that at all. It's more, how do you want to move forward? Like, what was the reason why you started? And knowing that, you know, what is it, just you need to come in leaner? Is it just you need to get your confidence up? Is it, you know, that federation just wasn't for you, or, you know, you're standing too high at the moment, it doesn't mean to stay with forever, but it's setting yourself up to what you can achieve and breaking it down in a bit more than anything, I guess.
Yeah, it is really hard. Like there's so many times now when I get into the depths of prep where I have like these flashback memories of what it was like right at the start, or like, you know, you probably get it, Georgia, when people reach out on Instagram and say, you know, thank you for inspiring me, or whatever it is. And I always think back to those times, and I think if I could help someone and show support like I could have had back then, you can make the difference to someone's whole life and their competitive journey by being truthful and honest about what this sport entails.
And I think the knockbacks, like you have to have knockbacks for you to know how much you want it, but also know how you can keep moving forward. Because if it was like a walk in the park, like you're going to get a knockback at some point and it's going to hit a lot harder. But when you have those knockbacks, there are definitely bumps in the road for you to like, I've learned my biggest things from when I've been knocked back the most, because it's been like, okay, what happened? How can I keep moving forward? And that's the biggest thing. When you have those moments of, you know, you've got to push harder, or you have those like failed moments, to then come back, it always makes it that much stronger because you've learned something from it.
Yeah, and it's so like, what I find from bodybuilding is it's so self-fulfilling. Like you can't really put it into words sometimes. And for me, going through various things, especially over the last couple of years, it's been my almost, I always say it's my religion, but it's been my outlet. And you know, the gym is always there, training is always there, and once you get to this sort of stage in the sport, it becomes a complete lifestyle. And it's always been something that I found that if I put effort in, I can get return, whether the return is a lesson or whether it's a podium finish. for me, it doesn't matter now, you know, it is for me, and finding your why is so important here.
And I mean, through all of that, you've obviously carried on. So, you know, what have been your achievements since? You had a really good, successful.
Just realised we only got to 2019. We straight on
successful season at UK Up. So
yeah,
tell us about that, and then what you've done since, because I know it just got even better from there.
And out of interest, was you self-coached up to 2019, or was you with someone then, or?
So I had a coach I actually had him for around 7 years, Stephen Box. So when I first started out, he was part of Team Box, which was like this real big group of coaches. There was like a community and stuff, and that's what I always searched for, a community, because I guess growing up and stuff, I never felt like I really fitted in anywhere in particular. And again, Georgia, we share that.
Very similar.
Yeah, it's like, you know, I always felt like, I don't know if these people are my friends, like, and then you get into like drinking and going out, and you're like, I'm just sort of doing this for the sake of doing it. And then competing and finding Team Box was like, this is so cool, you know, like I'm part of this community. That unfortunately unraveled, and Stephen sort of went out on his own as a coach, and then I carried on with him. He's now gone more into some other stuff in his career and what have you. I then went into not having a coach from like last, I think, August, so 2021. And now I'm coached by Tom, who's part of the Physique Collective, which is run by Joe Jeffrey. And he's a good friend. And then he's transitioned into coach. He said, you know what, like, I really feel like we could work well together. And I wasn't sure about getting another coach, and I would have for the prep, but for off season, I was like, maybe I'll be okay. And then it was a really good decision, because through personal circumstance at the end of last year, I was sort of doing an intuitive thing, and I didn't lose my way, but it was really hard to juggle everything at the same time. And including, you know, when you're in off season, you can relax more, but you also do need to have the elements of making sure you're progressing, making sure you're eating enough sometimes, you know, various other things. So then he coached me to the end of my off season into this prep. But after my 2019 season, I qualified, so I got Miss Universe with WABA.
Yeah.
And then so 2020 I competed in Portugal. That was my first pro show. So it was so, I don't know, really surreal, because you have all the athletes from all the different countries, and you're like, oh my God. So it was really good, but they were looking for more of a leaner, a lot of the routines were, I don't want to say it in a negative way, but quite almost flicky and dancey. And we've spoken about this, Georgia. For me, like, I like the bodybuilding, more like mandatory poses, like that for me is the route I want to go down. So after that show, I had to make a decision whether to continue as a WABA pro or change federation. So that's when I decided I would go and try UK BFF again, which is who I started with like 8 years ago. I didn't really have a very good experience at the start, and I was hoping that maybe that could be changed. Unfortunately, I didn't have a good experience again. Yeah.
I've not competed, but I've heard stories.
They were my first federation as well, 2000.
Oh, were they?
So I can, I understand what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah, it's really hard, because like I want to go down the IFBB route, and you can either go through UK BFF, or now this year I'm going to go through Two Bros, which, you know, it wasn't that I didn't want to go through Two Bros, but I saw a UK BFF show that's literally half an hour down the road from me, and I thought, okay, I'm going to try it again. And the main feedback was that I had too much muscle, but then to compete as a pro, you'd need more muscle. So it was going back to sort of the amateur division, and then and
basically, haven't I?
It's very interesting. I think, as we said, but we'll touch upon that, I think, shortly.
Yeah.
But it is something that's cropping up quite a lot now. That conversation. So something, you know, changes soon about it. But I think we'll get onto that shortly.
It's just great. Like when I told Joe about it, he was like, the same as me. He was like, I would take that as a compliment, mate. And I was like, well, actually, I do. You know, I actually didn't feel very disheartened. Like I wasn't. Obviously, you always want to win and what have you. You know, that's why you compete, because you want to. It's not just recognition in the form of a trophy, but it feels good to win. You know, and when you have one, you want to win again. You're chasing that. But still, I felt very, very content with my place in. You know, I came fourth, and you know, it is what it is. I didn't get a podium finish, but I learned a lot from that. I also learned that I probably wouldn't prep again if I had a massive life change. So I was getting divorced and moving house, and I decided to get divorced 4 weeks out. So I got a lot of swelling and various other things that didn't. My coach said to me, if you compete, you're not going to bring your best. So it's your decision. You either compete and maybe don't get a place in, or you pull out. And for me, I couldn't pull out. Like it would be very difficult for me to do that. So with everything considered, I've learned from it. And now this year, I'm going to go for 2 bros, working with Tom, and also going down the PED route as well, which we may speak about today.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. So we'll go into, obviously you've chosen to go 2 bros now. So kind of you've started, you know, we'll talk about the PEDs in a bit, but in the sense of how's everything going so far? Like how many weeks out are you?
So I've got 13 and a half weeks. Yeah. I'm going to do, so there's potentially, we benchmarked 3 shows, and then I want to qualify for the Arnold's. And I know you did that last year, didn't you?
Yeah, so that's cool. So are they all going to be, so the 3 shows beforehand, are they going to be other like 2 bros shows? Are they going to be other federations going to play? You know, what are you going to be? Obviously there'll be one regional for 2 bros, but
yeah, so all of them are 2 bros.
Okay.
I've got a pro card with NFM UK, UKUP, and then with WABA, and then obviously you have got like pure elite and things like this. I don't really feel like that's maybe me. Again, back to like bodybuilding.
I can relate as well to that, because a couple of people have said to me like I'd suit that muscle model category, but to me it's just I'm not into that. Like, I like bodybuilding. If I was going to get my legs out, it'd be classic. I'm not a muscle model type, so I get what you're saying there for sure.
And then you've been through all of this. So how did you then go down the route of becoming a judge? Like what one did you go for first? How did it then lead on from obviously competing to then decide to do judging?
So UKUP, I've always spoken to them since becoming a pro. Like we've just had a lot of back and forth, and I really hit it off with the judges, and also you'll agree. Like for me, it's such a good federation, especially for first timers. It gave me the opportunity to gain the confidence I needed to then, you know, take steps further in my bodybuilding career, and actually give me the belief that I could be good at this sport. You know, just little things that they do, and I feel like they are actually for the athletes. Like they're not just saying that, you know, and they're such a good federation. And we've always gone back and forth on Instagram and stuff like this. And then I said to them, I think it was probably about a year ago, if you ever need anything, you know, I can always help with stuff. I love your federation. I always tell people about it, blah, blah, blah. And then Wes messaged me saying, would you be interested in becoming a judge? And I was like, I screenshotted it to my mum. I'm like, I can't believe this. Like, this is amazing. Yeah. And the opportunity to judge physiques fairly for me is just mental, because for me, I know what it's like. It can change your whole life, what you place. And I understand that. And if I'm going to give someone feedback, I make it constructive. I actually give feedback, rather than some feedback I've received in the past is not very constructive and not very helpful. So, you know, I always look at all of the athletes. I always take the time to do that. You know, I've been judged at shows where there's judges on their phone texting and they're not even looking at the stage. So for me, it's been very, very cathartic, and I just really love being able to give back to the sport. So that was UKUP. And then Steph, who I do my Beyond Condition podcast with, she took over the UK WNBF. So there's like, each country has a president. So her and her other half, Andrew, took over the UK version of that. And I'm a judge for them as well. So I judged once last year, and then there's 2 shows in the UK this year for her.
That's amazing. And how are you finding, like, obviously judging? Do you feel, because obviously this is where it'd be quite interesting for you, you know, we know there's a standard with bikini. It is, you know, symmetry, it is balance, it is about presentation. Yes, it is to an extent, which we'll touch on in a bit, muscularity to an extent. They're kind of evolving from that, and that's why we get an athletic and things like that. But in the sense of, with your judging, especially in the 2 federations, like especially as one could be, I know it's first time at UK up, but it could be that people might be using stuff, whereas obviously WNBF they wouldn't be. You wouldn't expect it so much in UK up, but is there, like, with what you would be looking for, men or female, do you get told certain things like specifically, or is it like an overall thing? Like, how would you say there's a difference in just judging side of things? Not to go into overall federations, but in judging, have you noticed a difference in particular?
Also, just before we dive into that, just in case anyone doesn't know, so WNBF, I believe, stands for World Natural Bodybuilding Federation.
Yeah.
And UKUP is
UK
Ultimate
Physiques.
Physiques. Just in case people didn't
Yeah,
know, the
understanding.
federation
Talking
that
down
we're talking
versions.
about. There's so many different bodybuilding federations, and they all have their pros and cons, I would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the reason why we dive into this.
Yeah, I'd say most federations have like a standard to a degree of what you expect competition to be. So not to discriminate anything, but you would expect like zero towards the bottom, like first timers, get fun, modelly, things like that. Then you've got UK Up, which is very for first timers. I always consider natural federations to be something in themselves, but they would be a lot more, so like that alongside UKDFA, which is UK Drug Free Association, is pretty on par with FitX and NFM. They're all a fun show. FitX and NFM are untested, so you know you could be with either. And then obviously you've got like PCA, and then obviously two. So there are quite a few federations. So this is where competing female, depending on body composition, depending on your background and first time or not. That's where having a coach is really, really good to help understand federations and understanding what they're looking for, to know what might best suit you better based around what you look like. So yeah, going back to judging, there's a small tangent is kind of, have you been told anything specifically with a bit different between federations, or is the basis roughly the same? Kind of go into detail with that.
So with WNBF, it's you get like an electronic chip, and then you've got your categories, and then you've got different things that you mark on, and the same with UKUP. And what's really good is they are very, very similar. It's what you'd expect. So like you've already mentioned, symmetry, posing, and this all gets broken down as well at the athletes meeting. So UKUP and WNBF both do that. I know that some federations don't do athletes meetings, but I think most of them do now. And then you can get an understanding as to what you're being judged on. For the WNBF training, we did workshops on Zoom because of COVID and stuff like this. And it was back then when we were planning the first show. So we did workshops, and what they got us to do is we went through slides, and we all had to sit and judge how we would personally judge that. And we'd already had some understanding into criteria. And then they would collaborate all of our marks, and that they would then say, okay, most of you would have put this person first, this person second, this person third. And throughout the whole thing, we all judged pretty much exactly the same. So it was really good. And that was and that's the panel of judges that are at both of the shows. Again, with someone like Two Bros or the big federations, PCA, I'd imagine their judging panels can change quite a lot. So again, if you're competing at a show, you know, a regional and then the Arnold's, you're probably not going to see the same judges. So you may win and then you may come you really don't know. And it all comes down to a lot of the judging, especially at both of the federations I judge for. At the end, if there's X amount of physiques and you're all of very good quality, you do have to go down to the nitty gritty. It's things like, you know, for females, your hair, your makeup, even more so, the color of your bikini might be more suited to you. Like all of it then becomes very small things that contribute to the person that's going to place first. Sometimes, of course, you get a whole category and you think that's the winner as soon as they come out. And that is normally down to stage presence, as most people could imagine. You know, if you can hold your own and work on your posing, work on your stage presence, that's the biggest thing from the judging. You know, when you're engaging with the judges, showing that you're confident, it makes a massive difference. That would be my biggest hint to anyone.
And with most federations, when you are looking into federations, they do normally have on their websites whatever criteria, so you can look into more detail if there's anything specifically they're looking out for. And I know FitX, I went to the posing seminar, you know, they go on about how they're very fair. They kind of make sure they do tallies and they do things that, you know, overalls and things like that. So it is making sure that, you know, overall is fair. And I know things like PCA, if they've got a judge that's also a coach, and I think it's the same UK, they just come out. So it is making sure it's as fair as possible. And I think this is where it kind of goes into a little bit more detail now that most federations are bringing in athletic. So before there was just bikini, and now there's athletic. And then obviously you've then got like toned figure and then athletic, and it goes up and up. So then it's kind of going, okay, so like with you being told too muscular, there's such a difference between like FitX and you know, those kind of PCA style posing to NPC posing, because if you're not as muscular and you're a bit of a slimmer bikini girl, then that is the bikini nowadays. And if you have that more of a shape and more muscle to you, then obviously it's going to be athletic. But then that's when it gets a little bit confusing, because obviously NPC, two bros, they don't have that as such. It's hard, like me with you, being told you're too muscular, because at the end of the day, when you are looking at pros, you are molding your physique to that. So when you get told you're too muscular, it's can be quite confusing, can't it? But if we break it down, kind of the FitX, PCA, that, you know, in the case we have these two classes, and it's having that. It's a bit easier for men, correct me if I'm wrong. But men, it's very much just get really dry, get really conditioned, get really big, and you know, try. But with females, it's you can't get too conditioned unless obviously you're working up the
Well, you
ranks.
say that, but again, it's federation dependent.
Yeah,
It's crazy. Like, it's crazy. It's like,
It's so confusing for people, can't it? Like, so for example, my season just gone, you'll know this, Sarah, because you judged him as well. The chap that beat me at UK Up, Brad, looked absolutely insane, fantastic. And then he did PCA as well, won that as well, beat me again. I came second, which is fine, because that's how I would judge it too. He looked very, very good. And then we did FitX, and neither of us placed. So, and it's because he was too big.
Yeah.
And interestingly, my feedback from you guys and PCA was my stage presence was good. And FitX didn't place me because they didn't like my stage presence. So,
notice you.
Yeah. So within the 3 weeks, we did 3 back-to-back weeks. You know, so our physiques, our stage presence, all of that wouldn't have really changed, but it's just their feedback on, you know, what they were judging and what they're looking for. So it for guys, it's just the same, really.
Yeah, I guess so. So it is that subjectiveness to it. And obviously it's hard when you go, well, look at who they've placed before, because you don't know, turn up on the day. So to then be like, okay, like lean and conditioned, oh, that one was softer. Now they've changed their mind. So next show I'm going to go into a store. So well, actually, that could have been who looked better on the day or who carried themselves better. And when they posed, it could be different. And it's so hard. So, you know, I'd like to think most federations are very good when you contact them to say, there's always going to be a criteria. Go off as a whole rather than kind of making sure that, you know, we can make sure that we can understand everything. And then it's just making sure that we can, you know, see what you fit the best and then go from there as much as possible. So, you know, that's going to be the best thing. Having a coach, going to some shows is going to be the best way to understand.
And also just be realistic, like you said earlier. Don't expect to become a pro in your first season. It might happen. You could have very good genetics. You could, you know, have really good stage presence already. Things like this, it could happen, but expect to give some time to the sport.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously with going into that, and then it's a case of, you know, you're choosing to go down NPC now. So that's really, really exciting. So how are you feeling? Because obviously where we understand, obviously you've got all the other federations, and NPC is different posing in itself. So how are you feeling with, you know, the new posing there? How are you finding that?
And also, have you found you've had to change your training too much, or are you trying to manipulate your physique in a different way, build in certain areas toward the two bros category federation?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. We have changed my training quite a lot. So I'm doing 3 leg days a week now and 2 upper body days. The upper body days are less volume, and it's basically looking on hamstrings, glutes, funnily enough, and quads. Tom doesn't want my quads to get much bigger because you've got to try and get that balance, symmetry, and I do need to, you need that hamstring and glute tie, so that's a big focus. So glutes and hams are getting worked a lot more now. And then, like I say, upper body, still looking at delt work. So I do my delt work on my lower body days. So I start with delts and then I go into my legs. Cardio's just been introduced, but because I've gone down the PED route, nothing's as drastic as it has been in previous preps, because you've got that assistance there as well. So I am, the posing as well, I am getting used to it, but I've got a session booked with Emma Hyman this Sunday because I do need to understand it more. It's very different, isn't it? I like it more.
Yeah, I prefer. I might come back and haunt me, but I think it's a little bit easier. There's like obviously you've got the front and back. It's more like, it is a lot like you think with like, PCA style posing, it's very bam bam bam, and then you've got the flowy transitions. Whereas this seems like a flow all throughout. It's not so like
literally
bammy. But something I want to go back on when we were talking about obviously how we're critiqued and things like for judging and things like that. I think, yes, it comes down to like bikini, and it comes down to, hair. And I think people sometimes worry, do I need to have, do I need to have hair extensions? Do I need to, I won't get anywhere if I don't have my boobs done. And I think because obviously we touched on that earlier, it's not something that, you can get some insane bikinis. Like I've got friends that don't have theirs done. So it has to be, I've heard a few people saying they won't place if they don't get them done. And that really isn't the case at all. There's some absolutely insane bikinis out there that I know some girls love their bikini. They'd love to wear them all the time because they push up so much that it makes you look like you have, because of course you kind of want a little bit of what looks like a chest for symmetry if you're going to be really nitpicky, but it doesn't mean to say you have to go for those extremes. For the sake of like one day you have to, because you've got the likes of like Phoebe Hagen and things like that, she's absolutely shot up, and it's not a case of you have to have, don't because you think that winner's got a blue bikini, glittery heels, hair, etc. It's got to be what you bring, and that's never. It's a bit like if you try and copy someone's diet, it's not going to work. It's what you can bring to feel good in yourself. So pick a bikini color that. What I always say to the girls on the team is, what color do you feel confident in on a night out? What would you wear the most? That is the color you're going to feel confident in a suit. Your hair, what would you do with it normally if you were to go on a night out to feel good? Or, that is what you want to do with your hair. You want to feel good. You don't want to feel like you're trying to be somewhere else who isn't good. If you think really, really suits you, but you want to wear that type of bikini, but, it's on your day to feel really good. So you wear, I remember I was in such debate about buying the cocktail, more of the glitzy cocktails than there's, and I remember having a talk with Jasmine, and she even called me and she was like, get those damn shoes, because I was I think they're very me. I'm not that kind of person. And actually you can be whatever you want. Don't hold yourself back. Don't copy someone else. Just make sure that you are being true to yourself and you're feeling good in yourself on your show day, and that will just shine automatically on stage, and then that will automatically show off your presentation and stuff. I think that's
because it always helps. And that's the only reason I went down the route of getting my boobs done. I think as well, maybe compete first and make sure you like doing it before you maybe commit to big changes like that, because it is it is a big procedure. And I'd done 2 or 3 preps before that, and then for me it was like that actually gave me a massive air of confidence and helped me continue as a bodybuilder. But it's one of those decisions, isn't it? And like you say, bikinis, you can choose what you think, and then the person who's making your bikini will give you advice as well.
And going down the commitment, that's a good segue. Commitment route. Make sure that you enjoy it first, and then before you go thinking about I need to go take PED, so then make sure you enjoy it. Do like a full-on prep first. Have that commitment. Did you enjoy it? Pros and cons. Have a knowledgeable coach, and then think about what did you look like, what do you need to improve, what worked, what didn't, and you might do another one and go, I can keep going naturally. There's natural federations as well if you feel like you want 11 pro and fill, but there's nothing going through all of them. But then what made you decide now is the route you want to go down to then start taking, explain a little bit more about your choices and why you decided to do it.
So I just felt like for me to keep progressing, because I've competed so much, and to be able to go down the IFBB route, to be able to bring that, and for what I've already put into the sport, it felt like a natural progression for me, because I feel like as well, you know, age doesn't stop. That we're, you know, heading towards, I'm over the hill on 30s now. So I'm 33, and, you know, like I said, I've put a lot into this sport, and it was a decision when I was spending more time with Joe and things like this and learning more about PEDs. When I understood what they can help with and where they can progress your physique, it was a decision that it didn't take much for me to commit to that. But under the guidance of Joe and Tom, it's a safer model use. So the side effects are minimal. And for me, it's worth, you know, being able to progress in the sport.
So yeah, so you basically you've done your time within the sport. It kind of relates to our last video that we did, our last podcast. You know, when is potentially the right time to think about doing them, and for you, you know, you've done quite a few seasons. You know, you're pretty full on bought into this lifestyle.
7 years worth.
Yeah,
yeah.
Progress up the ladder. You've analysed your goal. You know what you want, and being realistic. You know, you're going to be against other people that are using them as well. And just in case anyone didn't know, so PEDs is performance enhancing drugs. Just because we have lifestyle listeners, but they might not know abbreviations.
Yeah, like you have a podcast with one people or people learning more, whether they're interested or not. It's an interesting thing to bring up to make people aware of it and safe with it. So like the key things is like, Matt, you've done your time, you've done it for ages. You've got knowledgeable help, and you've surrounded yourself with the best people. You're being extremely sensible with it, and you said it's a natural thing to do now. You know, you haven't just gone off the rails and expected, you know, crazy things. You've gone, right, what's realistic for me? How am I going to do that? And how am I going to hold myself accountable and have people overlooking that to make sure, you know, I'm doing it in the best possible way, especially when you talk about longevity of it. Like, and especially as a female, you don't want to mess anything up for the sake of like one season. Like, you want to make sure that, you know, you are still progressing and you're still doing the as much as possible.
Yeah, and like you mentioned there, you know, talking on my own podcast, talking about PEDs, safer use models, the awareness of them. The only reason I'm so transparent with my own story is because there's so many bad stories of people taking, you know, too much, the wrong stuff and whatever else, that it is leaving people in a bad spot. So it you know, I find it's really helpful to just be open and honest about it for people that are looking down that road. Perfect.
Okay, we're off.
Okay, perfect. So we were talking about your PED usage, the fact you're doing it now. So let's go into kind of what specifically you're taking and why, and the reasons behind it.
Yeah, so I've got basically through the safer use model, to put it in terms that people will maybe be able to understand a bit more, because it is like, for me, coming from not really knowing much about, when you look at actual PEDs, not just, you know, I'll take a bit of that or a bit of that. When you look at creating a stack that is made for actually building a physique for a certain federation, a certain competition, it's very, very different to what you would maybe get from a local gym or whatever it may be. So there's a lot of different things within my stack, but it's minimal dosage across all of them so that the exposure isn't so high. And again, that helps with trying to negate potential side effects and also being able to do this for, you know, several years potentially. So I must also mention that I also get blood work done, and that's such an important thing. So if you are considering this route, you know, understand where your bloods are at to then look at designing a stack for you to use, rather than just doing it basically blind.
A lot in the first podcast going on about how, you know, it's very easy to just go, I'm just get all this gear and I'm going to jab it in and see what happens. It's like, actually, you know, think about what you're using, why you're using it, check your bloods, have everything else on point. Like, it isn't just this magic thing that's going to make you have all these gains. Like, we want to make sure that, you know, like you said, longevity, health, everything is in like prime position. And I think that's what we kind of discussed before, is that, you know, it's good that health is now becoming a priority alongside if you do take anything. Like we were saying about how Matt talks about it with his guys a lot, like get your bloods done post show, get your bloods done a few weeks later, get your bloods done if you are going to do a cycle halfway through, you know, keep checking what's going on, because obviously, especially before you do anything, because if something's not right, It seems so ridiculous to then stick stuff in you.
Yeah, basically, Sarah's coach is with the Physique Collective, like she said earlier, and that's where I got a lot of my self-education from the Physique Collective.
It's really valuable for learning.
Really good tool. So yeah, the safer use, like, sort of method, I think is becoming quite popular now due to Joe's work, and I think it's a really, really good thing for the industry, personally.
Yeah, because I think we're going to be very naive if we don't think that this takes place within the bodybuilding industry. You know, if anything, it would be more so within this part of, you know, sport and fitness against other sports. But when you start to understand, expose things more, and you look into things, actually most sports use some form of PEDs if you're trying to get to an elite level or, you know, progress as an athlete. So, you know, it's weighing up what you want to get from it, but getting that guidance. And what I've understood from utilizing Joe and Tom's expertise and the Physique Collective stuff is that you can bring that exposure down across several things rather than bashing something on a really high dosage and potentially lead into, you know, quite bad circumstances for females, masculinization, things like this that you can't reverse. You know, if your voice deepens, if you get other things that can come from steroid use, you can't go back. So it's massive. And, you know, again, looking at what your goal is, looking at your bloods first. And then for me, because I've been bodybuilding for so long, my T3 and T4 weren't working in harmony as they should. And that got picked up on my bloods. I then went through the GP surgery and they did some more bloods. Unfortunately, I don't know what your experience is, guys, but general practitioners don't tend to do as much as we maybe need them to.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I had a close friend of mine. He refuses to pay private labs for his bloods. I've told him so many times, but anyway, he refused to do it, and he went to the doctors, okay, to get his bloods done. And I said, okay, mate, well, let me know what they say. Anyway, it was about 6 weeks later, they replied, and it was a message. It was like a text message saying your testosterone is too high. Please stop taking supplements and we'll test again in 2 weeks.
No way.
That was literally, I was like, what about all your other biomarkers, mate? Do they check anything else? Do they at least even check your blood pressure? And he was like, no, they just check my testosterone. Great.
And they are so general, and you know, it's not necessarily their fault because they are dealing with everyone. But if you're looking to do this sport or change your, even just changing your body composition, look at getting your bloods done because you don't know what's going on. And for me, you know, the T3 and T4, didn't know this was a problem until I got blood. So actually part of my stack is T3 and T4 to just get them working up to a healthy functioning range. I'm not actually looking for T3 and T4 for like weight loss or as a PED as such. And also my test was bashed from years of competing. So I'm using FemTest as well. Some of my stack is oral and some of it is injectable. This is something me, Josh and Joe were talking about on the pod. There's a lot of, I guess, I don't know, I think people perceive injecting as more extreme.
More
like it's
badly.
yeah. And at first I was like, oh my God, how do I do this? Like it was almost like so scary. And I spoke to my mum before starting PEDs because I felt like that was something I wanted to do myself. And, you know, the first injection, I was like, oh God, you know, am I doing it right and whatever? But Tom being the coach that he is, like he taught me through that. I can understand how you do that, how you even load pins and things like this, because it is quite scary and it's almost made me feel like I'm like taking it more seriously because it's another element on top of what I was already doing. But I really like the recovery, what I feel from being a PED user for me is very beneficial, and I feel good because I'm on the safer use model. So I can't really say anything against it, but I understand, you know, it is a choice.
Yeah, I think we should touch upon this sort of safer use model. Obviously, I'm not Joe Jeffrey, so I'm not going to articulate it as well as he ever would. But basically, the main principle behind it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but basically, you're going to tap into multiple metabolic pathways to drive hypertrophy or drive your performance to give that enhanced look, that better look for the stage, rather than just bashing one route, which is a traditional method. So a lot of the times you'll hear it down the gym, you know, what's the first cycle I should do, mate? And the big guy in the gym, he'll be like, oh, start off with 500 milligrams of testosterone, chuck some tren in or something like that. And
yeah, 100%.
And that's just bashing one sort of route. And oftentimes they'll do that until their body is under so much stress, they get too many side effects and they have to come off, which the old method, you know, would usually happen around 12 weeks, which is why that original 12-week cycle came from. So this is a whole new sort of safer model method where you tap into multiple pathways, not just androgenic steroids, and you'd go off data rather than an old method, outdated method. So go off of your blood work to see what's working well. Is your body responding to this okay? Is it not responding to that okay? Because we all have an intergenetic response to each drug. Just like if someone took, I don't know, if someone was drinking on the weekend, someone gets pissed quicker than the other person. It's the same thing for all drugs. So yeah, one dose doesn't fit all. It's, you know, very, very person dependent. But again, it's driven from data. So studies that are actually done, and then you're looking at how to use that potentially to, for the effect that we're looking for. And then if something is causing stress, potentially pulling back a little bit on it. And then, as I said, going from data. So that's basically the model, right?
Yeah. And, you know, there's also appropriate phases for bodybuilding. So now I'm using clenbuterol and yohimbine because I'm in a prep. So that's going to offer the stimulation. And I use those now. Whereas when I go into off season, that would be taken out. And then as I get closer to the show, primobolan will come in, but that's not there yet because you only want exposure to that for potentially 12 weeks over a year. And we'll use that when I get close to the show. So there's a lot behind it, and it's about planning your year as well, you know, working with a coach for a long period of time, not these sort of cookie cutter coaches you hear about, people that do 12-week transformations and then the client drops off the face of the earth. You know, it's, for me, if you're taking this seriously, look at building relationships with your coach for years and years, plan your year out, understand it, and do your own research as well, like you have, Matt. You know, there's self-taught options. The Physique Collective forum's like $6.99 a month. And the amount they have on there, you know, and like you said earlier, you don't have to compete to want to improve your physique, but make sure you understand it first.
Yeah, and you're doing a healthy sort of way to do it.
Like, healthiest.
Healthiest. Like you said, longevity is really, really key within this. I mean, just looking at your own bodybuilding career alone, like how much you've progressed through the seasons that you've done. And that's, you know, and that's a lot of that was without any sort of PED. So you want to still replicate that with PEDs, and you can't just do one cycle and go to the Olympia, right? You've got to be able to do it long term. And this is, again, I would never name any names or bash any coaches in particular, but we do know of coaches that would just get girls on androgen straight away. Because they do work. Like, yes, we're never going to argue they don't work, but so they will get in shape. But like you said, things like virilization will happen. So that's the gender reassignment. Basically, you know, when women want to become men, they take steroids, they take testosterone. So although that's not the effect we want to have when girls take it, it will happen.
For bikini or whatever it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's understanding what you should take as, like, for a category like bikini, you know, it's quite low dosage and very similar for wellness. But me and Tom did a pod on this. Like, I think people think that if you're, say, wellness, there's so much more muscle, you'd be on loads of gear. But something that Joe always gets across is he's got some IFBB pros that are on minimal doses, very, very minimal doses. And the side effects of that are going to be very minimal.
I guess the thing, like talking about longevity of it, is going to be, it's one thing to decide to go on, but like what happens when you come off? And that's the thing of, like, it's no different from when you want to make changes as a lifestyle client, you get a coach. Like, rather than, you know, going to Slimmer World and Weight Watchers and seeing what, you know, Betty is going to tell you at your weigh-in because you ate too many biscuits one day. Like, you go to a coach that has the knowledge to help you. So it's going to be the same, you know, when it comes to making this decision, you go to someone who has the knowledge. And it's a bit like Matt wants to make sure he has knowledge. So he goes to, like, the collective. You learn from people that's going to give out advice, and don't shun it away. And then make sure you're thinking that, as well as being on it, you know, when you come off it, how you get, like, what happens? Do you just stop? Do you have to, you know, and that's why bloods and things are so useful, but also, you know, making sure you've got the people around you that, you know, you haven't just done an amazing, you know, 10-week transformation on those, and then you stop everything, and then you're way worse off, like, physically, because you're not with your coach anymore yet. So it's thinking about, it's all well and good, I guess, starting something, but it's stopping as well. So having that coach, having that knowledge is going to help either side of things, and like you said, the longevity of it. And having those decisions before you decide to start anything is going to be the biggest thing, because you can start something on a whim, but like coming off it if it's not for you or whatever. So it's, I guess, having that understanding and knowing you're going to the right person and having the right support, rather than just signing up with someone, they put you on a load of stuff. Like, always ask questions as well, and that's why Matt wants to learn so much, because he wants to give so much information to his guys that maybe want to know anything, want to have any questions.
It's the whole reason I recently worked with a coach as well, to learn more, learn as much as possible. It's so important.
And that's gonna be a thing. Like, if you just start with someone, they put you on loads of stuff, and you haven't got any questions to ask, like, it's your body at the end of the day. You should, firstly, your coach should want to explain things to you, and it should always be your choice rather than them telling you what to do. And then don't be scared to ask, like, why, what is this? What does it do? Like, how long will I be on it for? Like, and that's, something that I see with Matt a lot. Like, his guys are always very open to asking questions, and he will always want to keep learning himself, but want to be able to give as much back and explain everything. So it's more it's them deciding what is going to happen. And then he gives loads of advice on things, rather than, this is your plan, this is what you do, get on with it. And
especially for guys as well, like, test being low is quite a common thing, especially in the sport of bodybuilding. So it's not all about your aesthetic appearance. You're going to feel like absolute shit if your test is really low. And people get used to this because they don't understand that, well, what feeling good feels like if they've had tests that's very low for quite some time. So you might be working with someone and all you're trying to do is get their test levels up to a healthy functioning adult, not necessarily over the top of that for physique development, but then there's the option to do that. So there's so much more to it than just competing as well.
It's funny you say that, because I have found that a lot. So before any of my guys do want to start anything, I do get them to do blood tests before they, we go down that route. And you know what, it is very, very common to see that, guys with very low testosterone, and it's not like they've just finished the dieting phase either. They're just, it's when they first start. So like you said, sometimes it can be about just using them to get yourself in a normal range, but performing optimally before even taking it to that next level. It's not just about blasting it.
And so obviously you're on stuff now and everything. When did you start it on prep? Did you do, I know you were in kind of like the season building phase before, like, did you have anything then? Is it a case you've decided to start now, you're starting prep? Like, I know you said you've got plans for finishes, what comes in and out, but what did you start on prep? Or was it kind of beforehand you had any kind of plans to start then?
So I started working with Tom January, and I started my first stack with him, and my first cycle, as it were, on everything got introduced that I'm on now. And then recently, like I said, I've had the Clen and the Yohimbine added for the diet phase. But initially it was having fem tests, T3 and T4, to get me up to healthy ranges. And then there's other things.
Spoke about them.
Yeah, finding out.
Getting it into a healthy range first before even think about estrogen.
Yeah. And that's the thing, it hasn't been like you took anything to like assist you in that way. It's more, to a degree, take it lightly, supplement based to make sure that you are a healthy range to then move forward, rather than be like, I'm gonna load myself with loads of
Tren.
There you go. I
don't need more Tren. Yeah, so that was my sort of base level of starting I didn't start the fem test straight away. I started that because it's quite hard to actually get fem tests, and I had to be able to get hold of it. So initially that was in my stack, and I started that as soon as I could get it. And then I also use GH, so growth hormone, and L-Cart, and they are injectable as well. And then metformin and telmisartan alongside that too. So it's quite a commitment as well, because, pinning yourself, doing that every single day, because it's different PEDs that I'm using. It's not just a case of taking one pill and that's it for the day or for the week. There's a lot more that goes into it. So people need to understand, it's cost, time, and what you're trying to do it for. It's a big commitment if you're going to go down the safer use model route.
So the, like, say, the growth, the termostat, and all the other things you mentioned, are you still on them now? Because obviously we know you took the other stuff as a kind of baseline. So that's something you take now. So what is kind of your stack as such now?
So I use growth hormone twice a day. So it's 2 units a day. That changed when I started prep as well. So it started at 1 unit.
Okay.
And then I also use L-carnitine every day in the morning as well. I then use the stimulants obviously in the morning. It has to be fasted alongside that, so they're oral. And then the telmisartan and metformin are every day as well. I think that's it. Obviously I take my normal supplements and stuff like omegas and what have you. And then the primo will start in my 3rd training block.
Okay, and how are you finding this beginning of prep to previous preps? I know obviously no prep's the same anyway. They're going to be different whether you're taking stuff or not. Like, it doesn't matter. But in your experience of, you know, how prep's gone that many weeks in before to how things are now, how much of a difference do you feel, like, mentally, physically, things like
that? So I don't want to say it's easier, because that even those words coming out of my mouth, it's like prep shouldn't be easy, but it's not easy. But the recovery,
we need to bear in mind, just before you carry, like, you are very prep minded. You are next level. Like, you came on my Hindu and you were there, like, loving life. You were prep. Like, we were eating cakes and, like, because that was just after my show, so I could eat cakes. Cakes and all, but you can be fully involved, but you do like prep life. So where a lot of people might complain because they might feel restricted or whatever, that is your life anyway. So saying prep is easy for you, I feel like you are naturally one that just, it kind of is everything of prep, because you love everything. So, you are someone that just, you do fully embrace every part of it. So I think it is, you know, you do always see the positives in it, which is a good thing. Not just the hard times, but you see the positives in it. So yeah, carry on.
No, yeah, it's a good point though, because sometimes you forget, don't you, when you've done it a few times, you sort of think it's second nature. But if a first timer was listening to this, or, you know, it's context to, like you say, making it a lifestyle. But what I found is that the difference in recovery was the biggest thing. Like, I don't get muscle soreness. I feel like I'm in prep, but I don't feel battered. And, you know, I've lost, so I'm 18 pounds down now, and it doesn't feel like 18 pounds down when, you know, I wasn't using PEDs. So it is a big difference, mainly in recovery, but also general well-being. I still get tired, but I don't feel like in the gutter tired, if that makes sense.
Yeah, your body just feels more efficient.
Yeah, it just feels good.
And I think that's the thing, you can appreciate that more because you're someone that's done it for so long the other way. And I think that's the thing. I don't, like, if anyone listens to this and go, well, I'm going to go on that because, you know,
exactly, yeah,
right, and all this, but it's like you've appreciated what it took before, so it is going to seem a different way to you now, because it's like, oh, hang on, you know, I have slogged, I have had to push hard, I have had to do this. So it's only assisting your work ethic. That's how I would see it, because you know, you haven't taken your foot off the gas, you've put the work in previously. You know, it's one of those things where it's just, you can see another light of it because you have had to do everything before and you've experienced it before, so you're very aware of what you'd feel when, to know how it may feel different. So that's quite an interesting thing to kind of reflect on, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Like you say, this isn't going to be right. Everyone listening, you should go on PEDs, but I think just getting the awareness out there, like you guys are, it's really important for people to understand their options and not go down these like dark alley routes, you know, like, and be scared, feel like they're alone, you know, which bodybuilding does breed anyway. Even like things like the judging criteria and various other things, you hear so many stories within this world when you get into it more. So it's just, you know, if you're going to make that decision, then make the right decision for you. But if you want to compete naturally, whether you want to use PEDs, it's a personal preference, like you say.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is like knowing when you go into this, your coach, first of all, should be someone you can trust. you can rely on, because we won't go into stories about what has been out and about. But yeah, it should be someone that is above board and trustworthy, and you can ask and very open to. You know, the community you build, don't ever feel you're alone. Don't ever feel you can't talk, because actually when you do immerse yourself in the like community, it's like the best community. Like I said, you know, at the wedding, I actually had like 2 of my before friends, so to speak, but we only had a table each of friends, and my whole table was you and bikini girls. Like, they are the most supportive people in the world, so you're never alone. So if you do have any questions or inquiries, reach out to other bikini people, or like with other men that do talk about it. And you know, don't be scared to ask, don't be scared to be interested. Like, that's the thing, like whether you want to do it or not, it's one of those things where it's always interesting to learn. Like, it's always so fascinating. No different from learning, you know, training properly. Like, learn how to train things, get advice, get the right help, and put yourself in the right, you know, like I said, don't go down a dark alley, don't feel that's the only option, don't feel you're forced into a corner. You know that this community is an amazing community, between like Joe doing all his knowledge with the physique collective, compact and is proper bringing all the women together, like between competing and meeting people, it is an amazing community to be a part of. And it's going to be some harder times when you compete, but it's like you said, establishing your why, having that support, you know, knowing that, you know, there's highs and lows, and being fully aware of everything's goal, and rather than just the glitz of show day, you know, being aware of the diet might be a bit restrictive, but post-show, which is probably something completely in itself that we talk about. But yeah, so it's kind of knowing that there's people out there chatting about it, and you know, wanting to know that you aren't alone, so you could reach out. And I think all these things, like with your podcast and everything, is a really good way to get people just, you know, to reach out and be aware of it more than anything.
It's so nice as well. Like, you'll get it when you get a message from someone that has listened to something you've put out there, or whatever it may be. Like, it is so fulfilling to help people that are in spots that we may have been in the past, or our clients are in. And also, you know, coaching people, it's the best job in the world. Like, you know, the massive life change you made to go into coaching, like, it's so cool to be able to help people on a daily basis. And you know, we want to give back to our community for what we've gained as well, you know.
And I think because we, like you said, we've been on the same path with kind of never really fitting in and being a bit lost, bit overweight, never thinking we could do that. Started off as the gym as like cardio, too scared to touch some weights. And you can really relate when people, lifestyle or competitive, want to make a change. Like, if you're a lifestyle person wanting to be confident in shorts, like, you know, in the gym, and you know, like when you can look back on what you've done and you can help those people, it's so amazing when they do share a picture, when they do feel good, because that's the community you want to be a part of. You want to be around people that are going to support you. So I think that's gone off tangent as well. So
essentially it's finding your why and understanding what you want to get from the sport. Like, that's the biggest message, isn't it?
Competing or not, obviously I know it's more aimed at competitive, you know, style of things, but competing or not, just knowing your reason why for like anything, and then having the right help to do it, because it doesn't have to be, you know, just getting that help and knowledge to keep me moving forward. But I mean, we've waffled for quite a while.
I did want to touch upon a couple of things. I've been patiently waiting. So yeah, anyone that is listening to this that does want to learn more, I highly suggest the Physique Collective, but also Sarah's podcast as well. She's putting out absolutely fantastic content. Beyond Condition.
Thank you.
Me and G both listen to it, which is why we really wanted to have Sarah on there. She does talk about it like in quite good detail as well. Oftentimes with Joe, she has fantastic guest speakers on. I listened to the one the other day you had with your coach, and that was really, really good as well. And that's what I wanted to quickly touch upon now. Your current stack, and obviously a lot of people listening won't have heard of many of the things that you've mentioned there, and which is absolutely fine. And it's all part of that, again, going back to that safer use method, because it's multiple different pathways. So I think it'd be quite cool to briefly talk about what you are taking and how it is helping you get to the goal, because they're not all direct hypertrophy agents, for example. So the human growth hormone, if we started with that, I presume the main reason you're taking that is for fat loss, right?
Yeah, so but then that started with the 1 unit a day in my off season, and then it increased in the prep, like you say, to assist that.
Yeah, because a lot of people think of growth hormone, or I know a lot of my old friends do, or a lot of old school bodybuilders, as something that big bodybuilders take once they've maxed out their steroids.
Yeah, and also Joe says, like, he gets people say, why are you giving women growth hormone?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, actually, I can give you the, you know, the research, the studies, the, like you say, human trials that show that it helps. And it's really good actually looking at the Physique Collective and the forum and looking at his videos and understanding it, because you watch the videos and he really does simplify it, doesn't he?
Absolutely, yeah, does really well to articulate his points. And like you said, he looks at the data, looks at, oftentimes, which I really like, is he looks at human trials, like you just said. He doesn't often use things that's been used on like rodents and things like that. So what humans can tolerate, what studies have been done and what that shows, and then we can deduce what a good use would be to drive the effects that we want from it, which is good. So yeah, so you've gone up to the 2 units on the growth hormone. And
my fem test was gonna, so I started at 4 milligrams, and that was going to increase to 5. But when I got my recent bloods back, it actually shows that since taking tests, I've gone up and I'm in the healthy range now, which before my test was like in the gutter. So actually, the 4 times a week is enough for me, and I don't need to. Again, you don't need to push something if you get the results. And I think, like you mentioned there about people that get too big or take a lot of steroids, they want to keep taking more. And it's noticing maybe when you've got the results that you're after, like mine was to get my test in the normal range. I'm there, so let's keep it there.
Yeah.
Rather than I'm there, oh, what else can I do to keep getting benefit?
You're already progressing nicely on it, so you don't need to escalate it to that next level, right?
Yeah. And then, so alongside, if I think of AM and PM, so growth is twice a day, so that's AM and PM 1 unit per time. And then in the morning, I also take the injectable L-carnitine alongside that, and the fem test 4 times a week. And then I also use telmisartan in the morning and metformin in the evening. Again, you'll probably get it where, you know, at first I was like, blood pressure medication, you know, and when you look at it being a medication, it could potentially make people think, well, why are you taking medications for like blood pressure, diabetes, and various other things? But it's because it's part of a stat that it then leads to the optimal physique development, rather than just taking one of these things. It's across the board of what you're taking as a stat.
Yeah. So Sarah's referring to the telmisartan there. So like she just said, it is a blood pressure medication. So yeah, like you said, people would often think, why the hell would you take that, and how does that help you look better on stage? But yeah, there's quite a few like different benefits to it. It's very, very helpful for guys that are on higher cycle amounts as well, because blood pressure is a big problem, isn't it? Cardiovascular. But also it helps reduce visceral fat, right? It helps reduce red blood cell count, which does get elevated when you're on high amounts of gear as well. So there are quite a few different benefits for it. What's the reason that he's got it on for you then? So just for our listeners.
So it's because it's part of the stack, and because I'm using different injectables and having the oral routes as well, to basically, for me and a lot of the bikini athletes that follow this safer use model, it's the combination that I wouldn't ever take it on its own. It's to supplement the other, PEDs within the stack. But again, like the T3, T4, we don't even class them as part of the stack because they're not essentially PEDs. But that's, as part of a safer use model, a lot of people will be on T3 and T4 as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's built, it's a safer use model, and then for me, like, it's slightly different because of my blood test results, but a lot of the bikini athletes will be on a similar stack, and wellness and different females working with Joe.
Yeah. So you'll notice that the majority of the things that Sarah's mentioning aren't actually steroids, which is usually the main driving force for someone's stack. That's really, really quite interesting. So you're obviously on Clen as well, or did you say Clen's about to come in?
Clen I've started. So I started on 20 milligrams, and then I went to 40 with yohimbine. So the first day I was like, I don't know if this is normal. Like, why is my monster making me feel so stim? But it was obviously introducing yohimbine. And then after a couple of days, that was fine. In my next training block, so my second meso, I'm going to be up in Plen to 80. So I guess there will be quite a change there in how stimmed I feel. And again, like, these things have to be taken fasted, and the growth hormone, I then have to do fasted steps before I can eat to gain the maximum benefits from them. So it's commitments in the lifestyle as well. It's not just getting steps now, it's fasted steps on top of other expenditure as well.
Yeah, and they're not being chucked in like willy-nilly. That they've all got a proper purpose for them and a direct purpose for them. They're planning obviously to help with fat loss, but it's also a hypertrophic agent, isn't it? And I've also read that it works very, very well synergistically with your growth hormone. So because they all work well together as well, you don't need to blast it, they work together. So like you said at the start, it helps keep side effects lower because you're doing multiple things but smaller amounts. So again, any sort of listener listening, that's a sort of benefit of having someone really knowledgeable in your corner. So Sarah's got a fantastic coach there who really knows his shit, and it's going to enable Sarah to do this, over a longer term and progress in the sport much, much further than if she could just blast a 12-week cycle or something. Yes, she might play really well over 12 weeks, but her days would be limited doing that before she turns into a bloke.
yeah, exactly. And that's what we always want to try and avoid. Like Tom, talks about it all with me, like the growth hormone, having that fasted in the morning. When I first started it, I didn't realize that was even a thing, but then he explained to me, it helps mobilize the fat, and then you combine it with the clen and yohimbine, like you say, they work together really well. And then I'm going to benefit the most from using PEDs rather than just using them half-assed. I can actually structure my day around when I actually take each of the PEDs as well. But it is a lot more time invested in it, like pinning yourself 4 times a day. It's quite a lot. And, there is that taboo thing around injecting, but it's a much safer way to do it and more effect for a lot of the PEDs that you would look down the route of taking anyway. Especially for females, it's quite scary to inject. But actually, I now quite like it. At first, it was like, whoa, this is really strange. But now I see the benefits, like anything, I enjoy it, if anything. So
you're one of the first I've heard of that.
I know, it's really weird. I hated injections before. Now I'm like, okay, morning, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And I guess it, like I said earlier, it sort of makes you feel like you're taking it more seriously, although you're not. It's an additional thing that excites me to see what's going to happen in my body as well.
Yeah, we heard a thing not long ago which we found quite funny. Like, yes, you can take some tablets, but that's like Anavar, for example. But what would you rather not have?
That was on there.
Was it on your podcast?
It was Joe and Josh saying he's more scared of turning into a man or of needles.
Yeah, that was it. And we
and it's true though, isn't it? But at first I was like, there's no way I can inject something into me. But when you sort of weigh it up and you understand it more, I'd prefer that than, like, we say with Joe, rather than bashing one route and, really fucking yourself over, going down smaller dosage across the stack is a much safer use model for people.
And you put all your foundations in place first before deciding to do this.
Yeah.
100%.
Perfect.
Yeah. I like to finish with like a rounding statement, and then anyone.
I like that. Yeah, I like doing that.
So basically, when going back to competing, because that's what I wanted the main title to be about, learning, because I think we may have confused people a little bit talking about all the different federations, different criteria. I think the main take home, and please correct me or elaborate on this, Sarah, because you are a judge for 2 of them. If you want to learn where you best fit, read the criteria on their website, but also look at previous winners and see if there's like to
a degree.
Yeah, to a degree, and see if there's like a common thing that they're rewarding, basically.
Don't just go off like the last place winner, just in case that wasn't a busy show or there was something different, like as a whole, what they tend to like as a trend. And
then you can sort of tailor your training, your prep around that. And in terms of PEDs, make sure that you do have someone either guiding you, supporting you, or making sure that you put in enough time with your own education, for sure.
Yeah, Yeah, for sure. And don't be disheartened, you know, with any of this.
Yeah.
This is a subjective sport. If you're gonna take part in bodybuilding as a sport, you need to be prepared to be objective, because it is so subjective, and, you know, understand what you want to get from the sport, do your best, and that's all you can do. You know, I went through those dark places so many times, but my why was to develop myself. So like you said, Georgia, I could take lessons from that and evolve as a person. So it's so important to just build your support network, understand your why, and do this with essentially guidance and, you know, a professional behind you.
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome.
I think that's everything.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you
for having me on.
That was well over an hour, wasn't
it?
Yeah. Sorry, Sarah, talking on loads today.
No, it's super cool, and I really appreciate coming on the pod. It's really good to see you two launching into the world of podcasts.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, I mean, you can reach Sarah. You can follow her podcast, have a listen.
Definitely do that.
Beyond Condition. We spoke about Joe
Thanks,
Jeffrey.
guys.
They can find you on Instagram.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to, you know, message me or anything like that, it's Sarah Parker _BB, of course. If you want to reach out, I'm more than happy to answer questions.
Amazing. So I think that's everything. So it's been lovely to have you on.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Catch up with you soon.
I look forward to the podcast evolving.
Okay, thank
See you later.
Bye.